welcome to another episode of the Sales RX podcast. My name is Chet Lefgren. I'm here with my co-host, Billy Stein, here to bring you another educating episode for all individual contributors, revenue professionals, and go-to-market leaders. As you know, we're in a two-part series talking about deal handoff. Part one, we talked about the relationship between SDR and AE, and today we're going to go farther down the customer journey and talk about the handoff between AE and CS. Obviously, with NRR being a really big part of conversations right now where companies are largely focused, we want to talk about churn a little bit. And is it something that salespeople are failing to set CS up for success on? Is there something in the deal handoff process that's going on? Or is it a larger part of the go-to-market strategy on what we're doing for customers once the deal is closed? But before we get into that, Billy, change of pace. We're recording this on a Friday night instead of a Saturday morning. Welcome to the Inglewood Studios. How was your Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving was good, man.
Yeah?
Yeah. Looks like it was great for you. It looks like you robbed the clearance rack at Saks Fifth Avenue. Look at that shirt.
It was express, but who's counting?
It's great, man. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was pretty good. I got back from Germany the Saturday before. And so Sunday was just a lot of sleep and football.
Yeah, getting back on a regular schedule.
Yeah, and then my whole sleep schedule has still been a little messed up since then. But Monday I put in like 12 really good hours of work. Tuesday, everybody like canceled on me last minute. So I did like 2 hours of heavy work in the morning and I had no meetings the rest of the week. And I said, you know what? This is the point of being self-employed. I'm just going to go enjoy my time and my freedom. So I hung out with family, my kids and my wife, and Thanksgiving was actually pretty low key. I was hoping my son would be into football, but he's just not there yet. So maybe next year. But he was, I was like, come on, just sit. Cause I have like great memories of watching football with my dad.
Yeah.
I was like, just sit, watch a little bit of football. And he likes it anytime people tackle. He goes, put their butt in the dirt. You know what I mean? Like, that's what he does. He says, he's like, when you tackle, what do they do? He goes, you put their butt in the dirt. He has like a 30-second attention span. But I just think there was so much stuff going on that day that he was like, no, not for me. So
a 4.5 hour football game and Dolly Parton halftime show couldn't hold his attention.
No, he couldn't hold my attention. How about you, man? What were you up to?
We go to the Bay Area every year. We always go to my wife's family.
Nice.
Her uncle, Thanksgiving is like his Super Bowl. He loves it. And there's always a really good spread. It was a brunch this year. My mother-in-law got a new TV, 110 inches. This thing is huge. And like it puts my 75-inch screen to shame in my living room. It's the only way to do it. But
yeah, the
drawback was she doesn't have like cable or anything. It is a smart TV, so she has Netflix and there's YouTube, but it's probably going to sound dated by the time we publish this thing, but like my wife and I couldn't stop watching content about OpenAI. It was crazy. Were you following it?
I was, because it was a lot of time on Twitter in the airport during travel. And so when I pulled it up literally the day I was flying back, I was like, got fired over the week because it was the weekend.
Yeah.
And I like literally went through and read his initial tweet and then his second follow-up tweet. And I read like everybody's tweets under that. And I was like, okay, this is really interesting. And now since then we've heard a little bit more about like what was going on. And that's crazy. My whole hypothesis was just, the board's probably heavily connected to one of the 3-letter agencies. And they're like, just going to move this thing basically over as a government tool because it's become so powerful. And he probably wasn't about that, but he's like, is he reinstated now?
He's reinstated now. And like, by the way, TechCrunch does a great job of chronicling like activities by the date. But the thing about it is like, as you watch this thing unfold, and like even today, as we film it, there's still breaking news all the time. It's like watching a full season of Billions, like rolled out over 2 weeks. Like you got like hostile takeover by the board, 3 CEOs within a weekend.
Board member saying he regrets his decision and they made the wrong move.
And like publicly ousting all of them. You have like the storyline of like the altruistic CEO, and then you've got, the nonprofit versus the profit. Should this be a government entity service or should it be run by capitalists? You've got the Anthropic, the competition that was like started by some OpenAI outcasts. You've got so much happening with it. It's it's like exciting. You're like waiting for the next thing to happen.
And then Microsoft was like, oh, we'll just hire him. But Microsoft like bought it, didn't they? So that was all weird to me.
Then Microsoft gets a non-voting board seat and like 700 employees write a letter saying we're going to follow Sam wherever he goes. Like,
isn't that like your VC firm hiring the CEO of a company that they're invested in that just got fired by the board? Isn't that basically like what that is? Because what's the relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI exactly?
They're the lead investor.
Yeah, like $3 billion or something.
$10 billion.
$10 billion, yeah. You've done way more research.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I've been busy on this thing.
You're clearly down a rabbit hole. I know some things, but that's what was so confusing to me. I was like, why? So wait, then Microsoft is going to hire him, but if Microsoft's the biggest investor, can't they just be like, no, we don't want this? But I guess they don't have enough seats, right? Yeah.
Dude, like, look, we keep a podcast together about working in the tech industry. Mm-hmm. Fair to say we care quite a bit about it, and we kind of nerd out on this stuff.
Yeah.
My brother couldn't care less. My friends don't care. My family, my wife doesn't really care
like
when we talk about it. But now, like, all you got to do is say, well, you know, if you watch Succession or Billions or any of these shows, like, I got something for you with this OpenAI thing. Mm-hmm. Now every day it's like, all right, what's new? Mm-hmm. And I like get out on Twitter and on TechCrunch. I'm like, well, honey, let me tell you what's new.
Yeah.
So we've been loving it. That was most of my Thanksgiving.
Well, and the fact that the creator of it is basically like, this has the power to destroy all of humanity. I think that basically opens it up to anybody who should care about it, right? I created Skynet and I have to walk
I'm telling
away.
You, like, there's so many great storylines. I cannot wait for this biopic to come out.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to let Jesse Eisenberg play another tech founder? I think he would be a great Sam Altman. They kind of have the look, you know?
Who would be Sam Altman?
That's a tough one. Alan Eldrick would be a great Sam Altman. He was the guy who played Han Solo in the Solo movie.
Do you know who else would be good? Do you watch Euphoria?
I don't know.
All right. I don't know the actor's name, but the dude that plays quarterback in Euphoria, like, I could see them like less jock, more like Silicon Valley with them. I think we might have something there.
Well, there you go. If you're a production company, maybe you need to bring Billy on as your casting director, because he's obviously got the idea.
I've thought about this.
There you go. All right, let's jump into today's episode. But before we do, let's hear a quick word from our sponsors, Kixie.
If you've been in sales for a while, you've probably noticed that it's harder than ever to get prospects to answer the phone. It's easier than ever to screen calls, and more numbers are showing up as spam likely on people's cell phones.
And apart from the time spent stuck on the phone waiting for prospects to answer, salespeople have to spend a ton of time entering call notes in the CRM, leave voicemails, and create follow-up tasks in the hopes of having future sales conversations. That's why we use Kixie.
It's the modern voice and texting platform that turns your CRM into a true sales engagement platform, all while increasing your answer rates through cutting-edge technology.
With their holistic approach and seamless integrations, you can enable your reps to spend less time on busy work and more time on having conversations with prospects using Kixie's AI-powered features like multi-line power dialing with voicemail detection, advanced local presence, phone number reputation management, and conversation intelligence.
Not only that, Kixie's team of sales engineers will help you build out advanced workflows and automations at no extra cost.
So head over to Kixie.click/salesdoc. That's KIXIE.click/salesdoc, or click the link in the description. Get a fully loaded 10-day extended free trial for your entire team. You don't even need to put down a credit card, and the trial comes with hours of call credits included. So let's jump into our first segment. This is Cap or No Cap. This is a part of the show where Billy and I take a look at either a clip on social media or a post that somebody made on LinkedIn, or even maybe something from an online sales community. We read through it or watch it or listen to it and then determine whether it's cap or no cap. Cap meaning, hey, we don't really agree with it. We think it's lacking some substance. Or no cap, which means, yeah, we totally agree. We find value in this and we think it's good to go. So today we're actually just going to look through one clip. It's a clip from a podcast on YouTube Shorts. So let's pull it up.
We talked about two aspects to nail sales handoff process. One, your sales rep needs to be coached and trained on how to do value selling. And B, you probably need to change a few things in your sales force to make those fields mandatory to reinforce change management and coach sales reps to actually ask the right questions and make sure that you got the ideal customer profile into your pipeline.
Yep. And I think 3, automation. So where could we start creating alerts earlier on? That way my directors, my managers know, hey, there's customers on deck that I need to start preparing for earlier on.
All right. So Billy, you've led 3 sales teams. What do you think in terms of the handoff process from AE to CS?
I think she's right, but I think there's more steps involved.
Yeah.
Value selling is the hot one right now in terms of methodologies, and she's certainly right. I mean, that in my mind is the leading sales methodology right now. I don't think she's going to make any friends by saying that you need to add more fields in Salesforce.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the thing when you like look at the evolution of every company is like Salesforce starts super simple because everybody tends to know everything. And then the company grows up and all of a sudden you got to start supporting more things because you offer more things. You got more people in it. And then automation. The problem is if that's talking about a handoff, what isn't discussed in that video is what's the actual interaction? Because if you're going to take that at face value, that assumes that your pre-sales and your post-sales teams don't interact face-to-face at all in terms of fulfilling that handoff and making sure that what was sold is what's going to get executed. So I'm going to say it's no cap, but I'm also going to say that that's not the holy trinity and there's a whole lot more detail and substance that needs to be involved in that handoff process. What do you think?
Or the quintessential quadruple, because it was 4. So no, you said holy trinity, but there were 4.
Were there 4?
Yeah. I thought I'd take it. It's like, what is quadruple? Quintessential? There we go. I agree with you. I think it's no cap. I think they're more just visiting about the process side of it, not so much the interaction, which I think based on the question that we had come to us, we'll talk a little bit more about that actual interaction later in the episode today. I actually really love 2 and 3. I love mandatory fields, and not so much, I think, even just adding more fields, but making sure that certain fields are filled out.
Like relevant fields.
Yeah. I love that. I love the mandatory fields. Like you cannot convert this to closed one until these fields are filled out.
Totally.
And then the automation side of it, I think, depending on your model, and if to what level you have professional services doing implementation on what you're selling. I remember when I was at 3PL Central, like there were certain deals you didn't want to send over to certain implementation managers. So you made sure like we talked to the CRO to talk to the CS leader before those actually went over. But I do like the automation side of it, setting up the right triggers and the right notifications to kind of move some of that through. So you eliminate the Slack messages, the emails, things like that. You kind of let people operate with a little bit more autonomy. But I think in terms of like handoff processes, I don't know if one is relevant personally, because it's like, hey, you're kind of talking about like what sales needs to do now. That's a little different than like the actual handoff process. Of course, we want to value sell or whatever type of gap sell, whatever type of selling you want to do, challenger. But I agree. I think 2 and 3 specifically are things that a lot of companies don't think enough about. And so now you have this opportunity, and then CS is going back to the AE and they're like, hey, what about this field and this field and that field? These are like things we need to know, which I'll also talk about a little bit later, like document info and what should be on like a handoff document specifically. But to that point too, automation to get that document filled out.
Well, and you and I are thinking the same way. Value selling is transposed across the entire customer journey now. That's not necessarily living in a sales silo anymore. Yeah. Especially if CSMs or AMs are in charge of renewal, upsell, expansion.
Asking for referrals for the sales team.
But you and I are right on the same page. Like you can add Salesforce fields and you can gate them in such a way that they are required before you flip it to a close one or whatever the case may be. But all that has to be done for that handoff process, which should have documentation. It should require some interface, especially if it's not like a self-service implementation that you provide, which I don't think they're talking to a company that's all right, cool, you buy and then it's just good to go. Just get started, blank slate.
No PLG motion.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's jump on to the next segment.
You're probably wondering how we can both work full-time, produce a podcast from the Inglewood studios, and still find time to enjoy our lives.
It's because we partnered with Content Quarterbacks to help produce our weekly podcast.
Content Quarterbacks is a full-service digital media production company. They will help you ideate, create, produce, and publish your B2B podcast.
Not only do they provide us great content to share with the SalesRx community, they also help us publish our podcast on multiple platforms. They review and track our audience analytics and episode performance, all while providing strategy sessions to ensure that we're bringing the highest quality edutainment to you, our listener.
If you're in the B2B space and want to have a great show like this, you can click the link in the description below and book a free consultation with Content Quarterbacks.
So stop thinking about creating content and start doing it. Now let's get back to the show. All right, so this segment is called Billy's Black Book. In this segment, Billy finds a professional happening or an industry trend or something that he's noticed in his career, and he's going to outline it for us, talk about what it is, why it's important to be thinking about it, and some information and insights behind it. And then obviously, you know, as I learn from him and hear him talking about it, I'll want to ask him questions and kind of dig deeper into the conversation a little bit around the topic that he has prepared for us. So in line with what we're talking about, deal handoff from AE to CS. What do you got for us today, Billy?
Yeah, today I want to talk about CS's role in the customer journey. And I think a starting point for all of us is, you know, a lot of sellers are instructed to say, you know, the same canned explanation of what their professional services or their post-sale handoff looks like to a customer. But in reality, if you're somebody that doesn't really know what your post-sales colleagues do, you're really not alone. And I think I would put myself in that same bucket because, you know, when I look at high altitude of customer success, account management, implementation, support, we're all customer facing and they're similar to pre-sales, but they're very different. And, you know, when I look at customer success, once upon a time, I used to sell fundraising software to nonprofits. And the way my company was competitively positioned was you got the platform, but you also got an account manager, and it was a very hands-on account manager. And I would sell that more so than I would actually sell the software. And I think we all wish it was that way, that we were able to. And I would hope for any sales professional that you are doing it because, you know, a really good customer success manager, a really good account manager, whatever that naming convention is at your business, that's a well-informed, data-driven business analyst for your users.
Yeah.
And when I think about that, it's like, it's somebody who can get their hands dirty, that can be a point person on your software, that frankly, a customer doesn't have to pay more money to bring in an in-house employee. And as we've been talking about handoffs, and, you know, last week we talked about the handoff from sales dev to sales. Now we're talking about sales to post sales. A really good customer experience and the ability to be successful with your product starts with a great handoff.
So let's talk about that process and kind of back up a little bit, just because I want to kind of outline like your train of thought on like what a customer success manager does and where their biggest focus should be. Even though you've never led CS, but you've seen successful CS models built and you've led 3 sales teams now, what does that customer success manager do in that relationship with the customer once it hits post sales?
Yeah, I had fun with this topic this week. I actually talked to a handful of my friends and former colleagues that are account executives or are sales managers. And I asked them like, hey, what does a customer success manager do? And I got a slew of different answers. We talked about churn.
Mostly crickets, right? Other than like the few 4 things we probably are all thinking of.
Yeah. I mean, look, we talked about, you know, NRR because that's been the buzzword metric during this pitfall in the economy. And we talk about churn, but if you leave it to salespeople to talk about what the impact of a customer success manager is, you get some really good answers.
Mhm.
So I'm going to share a couple of the things that
Prevent my clawbacks.
that's what they do for us, not for the company.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So my favorite answer I got was sales builds the bridge between two companies. Customer success maintains it.
Mm.
Yeah, I like that answer.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, like if you use any software product, your customer success manager, your account manager, whoever you're working with a company, they're the face of that enterprise for the people that aren't high enough up the ladder to interact with their C-suite that are the faces of another company.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. And look, they do drive NRR and they do reduce churn. They serve as the point person, but you know, the most important thing, like if you want to drive NRR, you want to reduce churn, you have to drive adoption. And a really good customer success manager who's really proactive and they're doing their thing with their customers and they're able to interpret data, take a look at health scores, maintain health scores, they help you be really good. We talked about value selling. I tell every prospective customer that I'm here to do three things. I'm here to support you at the speed which you need to be supported. I'm here to challenge you to think in ways about what you're doing through the use of my product that you might not be thinking about, but should be. And number three, I'm here to give you a really good experience while you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about a customer success manager, like that's the same thing that they do. And that's the same thing that account managers do. And that's the same thing customer support does. And it's the same thing implementation managers do. So that whole post-sales cohort, you know, when we talk about value selling, like that's what we mean by it. And I think that's where she was coming from in that video.
You know what I've always recognized about some of the best sellers whose calls I've ever listened to is also when they are not just selling the current state, like the product that we're talking about and the benefits of it and the desired future state you can get, blah, 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 is when they're talking about like life after you're done talking to me.
Right.
And they talk about the support side of things, but I've always loved hearing the term dedicated customer success manager. And I've always found that like top sellers always hit on that when you're done with me, I'm going to have a dedicated person that's going to work on your success.
Right.
And it's like, it's so funny listening to average sellers versus great sellers when they're talking about the post-sales process, that lack of hitting on that storytelling piece that you are going to have that person that's going to represent our company in terms of value. Like you get the same person, the same way that you've had the same person dealing with me. Granted, that person might go to another company and we'll figure it out. But for the most part, even in my career, when I was selling logistics software, that was huge when people were like, oh, it's like the same person. Yeah. Like we don't just have like a 1-800 number.
Right.
You have
not just a chat bot.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, here's the one more thing that when I was talking to other sellers and even when I was just thinking to myself, like, what is the value a customer success manager brings or what's that aptitude they have? What's the number one thing that almost all companies are promoting to their users during this more difficult economic gully we're in?
Consolidation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Consolidation. Like you see it in M&A, you see it in new product builds. Like everybody is trying to be that one-stop shop so that it's just one outgoing bill, one place to go to log in to do everything and run a lean enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
When you're rolling out all these new things, whether it's an acquisition or whether it's a new product that you build, somebody has to pilot it with customers. And that means they have to wrangle in the product team and the engineers and everybody that's helping to support it,
Mm-hmm.
as well as all the other people on the user side that are now having to get immersed in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's become like one of these very new skills that customer success managers who are really, really benefiting the company, something that they're really good at.
Yeah. So where in this process do things tend to break down and like who's responsible for that breakdown in your experience? Like, so we've got this idea of what it is, why it's important, the benefits, some of the responsibilities, but that's a perfect world scenario. We know it's very far from that in a lot of orgs. Even the best works, most likely. It's never going to be perfect. But where does that process tend to break down, and who is typically responsible for it? Is it the sales rep who's not setting them up for success? Is it the implementation manager that's maybe trying to get through a lot of projects quickly? So CS is then kind of like, once they're handed off. Is it leadership? Where is this process breaking down? Who's responsible?
All right, well, let's leave the implementation heroes and the leadership out of it. And let's just talk about sales to customer success, because in reality, a smart company should have a way to assign a customer success manager at the time of signature. Mm-hmm. Even if they're not involved hands-on in the implementation, even if they're just there as an extra personality during it to help assist with it. Let's just focus on those two for a second. And I think fair to say, if we asked a room of customer success managers, they're going to say, well, sales is responsible because they don't take good notes along the way. They sell things that should not be sold, that aren't ready. They don't accurately represent what it is that we do. But at the same time, like, if the shoe's on the other foot, like, part of the problem with that breakdown is when sales doesn't know what customer success does, when they don't know the model, when they don't know if it's like we proactively have a meeting every week, there's a monthly call, whatever, and here are the things that they're going to be doing, then both parties are to blame. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, like, the kickoff call is so critical. And whether it's SMB, whether it's enterprise, whether it's, mega enterprise, like if you're selling Oracle, that first call that you have with your implementation team really sets the tone for how that relationship is going to go. And as part of it, like, if you're going to transition an account, we even talked about, like, there should be Salesforce fields, there should be automation. Things have to be well documented. Mm-hmm. They have to be well documented in that CS handoff so that a customer success manager sounds apt when they get on the phone with somebody for the first time. Sounds like we are like we've run fluid, and now as we transition, they know these are the 5 things that you aim to solve. When that's not done, it gets very uncomfortable. It also happens with account managers. If an account manager who's working on a renewal or trying to upsell something, if they're not very aware of what's happening in the business, then, you're busting your tail as a customer trying to be successful on this platform. And then in comes this person hitting their jewel pod, talking to you about, like, all right, so, like, what do you guys do as a business?
Yeah.
And then the other thing where this breaks down, and again, I think this comes back to not truly knowing what a customer success manager is, what they do at your company, what their cadence is. If sales doesn't know what a CSM does, it's really, really hard to work well together. Mm. And, like, a couple of things I was thinking about is, like, when we sell to customer success teams, they talk about LOA, lists of accounts. If you work with 10 companies, you're probably pretty close with everybody, and you're probably pretty hands-on all the time. If you have 100 customers on your list of accounts, then if I'm selling a customer success manager as, like, being really proactive and, like, it being a very consistent relationship, I'm already giving misinformation because I don't know how busy the customer success team is.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like, rules of engagement. Like, as long as we're going down these acronyms, like we went to LOA, now let's talk about ROE for a second. Like, if I'm handing a customer off to Chet and maybe you don't get involved until after a customer goes live, and, like, the company outlook is that is too many cooks in the kitchen, and I'm saying, oh yeah, you're going to meet Chet right away. Now I'm overselling.
Yeah.
The last thing, and this is just something that I've observed a lot in practice, is there's a scalability conversation in customer success. And I'm not saying it's necessarily right because I don't work on that side of the house, but what it can feel like is companies scale, and especially like companies that are in hyper growth mode and they still exist. When new CS leaders come in, their goal can feel like they're trying to make CSMs less active throughout the process. And in my view, if your company is doing that and you have some sort of philosophy about like less time with the customer is better, then it starts to raise questions of like, well, what are we asking them to pay for? And if you're a premium solution compared to the rest of the market, like why are they paying more for us if the support doesn't even feel internally like it's there? And that's not necessarily the case. And again, I think that's a lack of empathy and not truly knowing what's what with our cross-departmental partners. But it breaks down when people feel that way, because if we feel it internally, we're going to say something externally. Eventually, it's going to slip.
Yeah.
And those are some of the areas where I feel like this can break down and this can get very bad. And the customer is ultimately the one that pays the price for it.
No, I totally agree. I know that in the next segment, we're going to talk a little bit tactically about that handoff call. But
yeah,
if you were to summarize all this together then in like 3 key points, what would you say good handoff between sales and CS looks like? One of the things that I'm hearing right now is alignment and visibility, which I don't know if they're two separate, but definitely one together, right? Is the team aligned on the rules of engagement, the meeting cadences, the level of support? Is there visibility into what those steps actually look like so we can better sell that in pre-sales and we're not overselling the post-sales team? But what would you summarize as like, what does good handoff between the two teams look like?
I think number one, you have to have a process. Like there needs to be an active account doc that's centrally accessible, and there has to be a cadence. And when I think of a cadence, I think any account manager, any customer success manager, if they're going to go be successful with a customer, before they even meet them the first time, they should be able to clearly find things like, why did they buy? What risks were presented to the pre-sales team that could show face post-sale and prevent them from getting activated on time? Any necessary timelines are really critical because they tie right in with that risk. And the other thing is like in sales, depending on how much time you spend with somebody, you should be learning what their triggers are. If I know when I talk about, situation A with you, if I know that that's like a trigger for you, maybe
LinkedIn influencers. He doesn't bring it up around me anymore. We've recorded enough that he knows not to bring up LinkedIn influencers around me.
Well, I think of an example like, look, if you're brand new at a company, you're trying to stay under the radar and you're trying to be successful and, figure out your form within the company and do it under the radar. But if I'm asking you too many grandiose questions during the sales process and you really don't know, or, hey, I don't really want to share that on a recorded line, customer success should know that too, because we want to make sure that we're giving you the best experience possible while we're trying to help you solve your problems.
Yeah, calling out those idiosyncrasies about the specific customer
we're
dealing with.
Right. The second thing is like, AEs have to know what's going on. And I don't think that is something that lives in a silo and that's a zero-sum game where that's all on customer success. AEs, you got to stay engaged with it too, especially if you have a chance to get a true up, an upsell, whatever the case may be.
Referrals.
Exactly.
Referrals.
Exactly.
Nobody talks enough about referrals. Like we talk about it, but we don't actually like act upon it, which is crazy.
But there should be a healthy feedback loop so that AEs know as much as CSMs do about the high level context of any account. And it shouldn't be something they're finding out on a call or worse in an email that goes straight from buyer to seller and excludes that customer success manager, that account manager. And then the last thing is like, there needs to be very, very clear ROE when it comes to who does what for a customer. there needs to be somebody monitoring their health score. There needs to be somebody that handles commercials and contracts. There needs to be somebody that's handling quarterly business reviews. And collaboration's good, but somebody needs to own those processes and somebody needs to support in those processes. And I think if you do all those things, you'll be just fine in this process. But they are things that most people learn through trial and error. And if it's on your radar and you're at least failing with the attempt to succeed as you go through those trial and error processes, you're going to be a lot better off as a business and your customer is going to be a lot better off as a result.
And that's an interesting one you call it, because I've been at places before. One place specifically, I won't call them out by name, but it was, you could get clawed back up to 6 months, but you had upsell commission opportunity within the first 45 days, because that was usually what implementation took. So maybe there's something missing or something we need to add it, or API integration or EDI, whatever that might be. And there were times where things would hit the fan a little bit, and immediately the first thing CS would do is throw it right back. Oh, you need to talk to your salesperson about that. It was almost like I don't want to handle this, when there should have been more encouragement that it's like, hey, let's collaborate on this together. But especially when it's outside of the 45 days, like, you can't just send them back and say, hey, you got to go talk to them because they think you sold them this thing and this isn't it. Because I don't have any commissionable opportunity here. You're taking away from selling time what my core responsibility is. If something does end up being sold, you get credit for it. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. And it's not just about like, I don't get any credit, I shouldn't have any involvement. I'll be able to put out the fire, but you need to be the frontline rep in this scenario. I can be on the call to add sympathy, empathy, whatever need be, clear up any product confusion, refer to old demo notes, whatever that might be. But you got to be the frontline rep handling this now. You can't just toss it back in my court and say, oh, well, the person you talked to 3 months ago is the person you need to talk to about that because I didn't sell it to you. No, but you are ensuring their success, and their success might be limited by this right now. So now it's in your timeline. I'm here to support and help and give any resources necessary, but you got to kind of take that onus,
And there's so many things within that, right? Like,
lots to unpack.
I mean,
can't get to it today, but
I'm going to say something to our listeners here. Not all tech companies are full of people that want to sell vaporware and then say, all right, cool, my 45 days are up. My commission check came in and I don't care. That's not reality.
Yeah.
Tech companies, for the most part, are filled with pretty decent people with good moral compasses. And nobody wants to have hard conversations. And you never know how somebody's going to react to something. Mm-hmm. And so not a lot of people want to have that conversation about, they think we oversold them something.
Yeah.
Sales guy, that's on you. Actually, 48 days. Customer success manager, that's on you. Good luck. So I think there's a lot of like human element that comes to that too, and collaboration, trying to figure out how we're going to go about it so that that customer who is feeling a certain way doesn't feel bad that their $1,200 a month is going nowhere with a product they don't understand how to use.
Yeah. Hashtag Team Human.
All right, moving on to the third and final segment, Doctor's Orders. This is the part of the show where you, the listener, submit your questions and go-to-market challenges to get a prescriptive, tactical, and practical approach by the sales doctor himself. So, Chet, you got one from a Rev Genius submission.
Yeah, I think this is somebody that reached out to me directly on Rev Genius, so we're not going to share their name, but this was a really interesting question I got from the hashtag community go-to-market channel.
Identities will be redacted, but here's what they said. They said, hey, Chet, we're struggling with making the most of our handoff calls with CS. The call typically feels like a meet and greet with their customer success manager, and it just feels awkward, and we're afraid the customer leaves the call wondering what the point of the call was. How have you managed deal handoff before to make the first call engaging and build excitement for the customer to continue their journey with us?
Yeah, so that's pretty high levels, but I will say I get where they're coming from because I've been on a lot of those calls where either I, as a buyer myself at a previous company, or even in the sales doctor bought in software, and it's like, what now? That's like the question I'm asking. I've been on implementation calls, or let's call them kickoff calls, where as a seller, I walked out of it and I kind of went, oh, think my customer is asking that question themselves. And then when you know it, I get an email 2 hours later and it's kind of like, so what now? And you're like, oh God. So yeah, the customer walking away from the call, not feeling it was awkward is actually, they're probably actually not feeling that was awkward. They were actually probably feeling more of a perceived loss of value. As you talked about value-based selling, we talked about not overselling things. There is always that lack of alignment and vision for us to clearly sell what post-sales looks like. And you just sold them this amazing thing that's going to solve all their problems, cure all their ails. And they show up and it's like you said, somebody hitting a jewel pod, like, hey, what's up? You know, hopefully you're not hitting jewel pods on your handoff calls.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully you're not, but you know, they walk away going, okay, so that could have been in an email. And that could have been an email.
This whole meeting could have been an email.
Yeah. So I took time out of my busy day running my business. So I think about handoff templates and adding intentionality to the call. And I want to dig in. I know we gave some method and principles in our last segment. I want to dig in tactically, like finite little details that I like to add in that handoff document.
Yeah, let's run it.
I think it's really important to actually have a solid one. And this is something that I've advised in the past and helped companies create because I've seen what good looks like. When I worked in logistics software, we had an incredible way of going about these things. And so I'm going to read some of these things if you're watching on video, because I'd rather get it right than try to impress you and say it all off the top of my head, because you can only remember so much information. So I literally for this pulled up a former document that we had used, and I looked at the sections and how we would map these out. And I was like, okay, yeah, I remember that. And these things are really valuable. And these are things that I even try to use in my business, but I don't hand the call off to anyone typically. So I kind of make sure these are boxes that are checked and things that I know personally as I'm working through the customer life cycle, and then obviously trying to measure my LTV and get referrals and things like that. But the first one is like an org rundown is always really good. So listing out the roles of the people at the company, the champion, who signed off the check, the budget holder, who had to say yes to the budget holder in addition to the champion, who are the admins that are going to be working alongside you, who's the owner of the project, because sometimes the champion and the person managing implementation is different.
And these are all different conversations you're having with different people based on every designation you just gave them. And
potentially in the future, right? If they're at risk of churn, who are the people that you're probably going to want to reference getting on a call?
Right.
Decision maker and budget holder, in addition to, you know, the person who's owning the relationship between the two companies, because sometimes it gets handed off, right? The champion isn't always the person who's going to own the relationship with the software here on out. I also think, you know, of course, their industry, ICP, even knowing the company's own value prop, I think is really important. What is the value they give their customers? So all the, you know, who are the buying personas that they're selling to? That's going to help you have a better understanding of their business, because when you're in customer success, you're essentially acting as a business liaison for them to better run their business.
Right.
Right. So I think that high level information is really important. I think things about the contract are really important. So terms of the contract, what version of the product do they have? What is the term of their agreement? What is the cost? What were any discounts we had to provide, or any red lines that we had to make considerations for, special exemptions, things of that nature? Gives you a really holistic view into their budget consciousness, cash flow issues they might have, potential red flags that maybe we don't hear ahead of time, but that we might know. Hey, they might be at risk for churn because we're on quarterly billing for them and we're 1 quarter in and it doesn't seem like they're adopting the software. Are they just going to not pay the bill and not use it? You know, like a lot of devils that live in those details. You called a couple of these out, but why did they buy software? Also take it a step further. Why did they buy it from us?
Mm-hmm.
So why did they buy software? What is the compelling event or the business trigger? Why did they buy it us? What was the key differentiator? Why they came to us? And why did they buy it now? What was the cost of inaction that we highlighted for them waiting 3 to 6 months? What do they have happening in 3 to 6 months that they needed this now, so they would be better within 3 months to handle that project or initiative? What are the 3 most important KPIs to determine success? I like this one because now we have something to measure us against. For legality's sake, that might even help us if they want to get out of a contract, to say, well, you have to provide this information because we know what your baseline was. We know what your expectations were. Let's measure those. If we're hitting those KPIs, that might save you in a future lawsuit. I've seen it happen. I'm not a lawyer, but I can say it's been helpful in the past to have worked at a company where it was, what are the 3 most important KPIs that we need to measure that determine success? Knowing what they were when we started the project, and then seeing what they were 8 months down the road when they anecdotally felt like the software wasn't working for them, and going, well, what are these KPIs at now? Them having to peel back the books, and then us saving the deal because they actually found out it was other areas of their business that were affecting them, because there's a difference between data and anecdotes, right? And so just feeling like something isn't working, isn't good enough. How do we actually measure success? And then what are the 3 most important features that are going to drive the growth of those KPIs? Probably more relevant if you're selling a very technical product with a lot of different features and functionality. But like, one of the things I do like that Keenan says in gap selling is, like, on the demo, only show like 2 to 3 things. Don't show them the entire software. You can do another demo where it's more technical, but like hit on the 3 most important things. So like, what were those 3 most important things? And a CSM probably doesn't want to spend an hour watching your first demo or 30 minutes watching. But
that should be in your discovery notes anyway, because that should be in the first 10 minutes of the call.
Yeah. And that should be, that could be something as easy as pulling a Gong transcript and getting that up for them, or whatever that might be, right? Like just making sure that they understand the 3 most important features that are going to drive that growth. And then what are the workflows that we're going to have to advise or solve for to make those features work? Because sometimes there has to be a little solutioning here. Sometimes you have to think about, well, hey, we do it this way. You're trying to do it this way. This is what we would suggest. Your way can work. This is how we can make it better. This is how it would be optimal in the software. And that's probably my logistics software background speaking, because that was something we had to do a lot, was kind of help them mold their workflows to their warehouse layout and the features that they were using and how those were working. So that's the first part, is this handoff document. And Billy's getting really emotional at this stuff right now.
No,
you got something in your
my contact lens is in a different spot right now.
I was like, I keep trying to look at him while I'm talking, and I'm like, am I making him
You're
cry?
making me really emotional right now.
You're just really, really getting me where it counts about CS. So that's kind of the preface. When you jump on the call, I don't think the seller should really talk at all. It should be literally a handoff. To like an SDR to AE handoff on a discovery.
Introduction, Chet, this is now your meeting.
Yeah. And then CS runs it. Review the why and the what of the customer rundown. Kind of that thing we talked about. Hey, Billy, super excited to have you as a customer. I'm going to walk through this, and this today. First part I want to dig into is just affirm that the reason we're here and what we're solving for. And that just shows like, wow, Chet listened to me. And wow, Billy gives a crap, because he's actually repeating it back to me and he's making sure that we're on the same page. In CS, I feel like people can have an idea of what people want to do because of what the problem that we solve for, but it's like what specifically matters to them. So I think that's really important. I think discussing the implementation strategy and the timeline. Hey, here's when tech setup's going to happen. Here's when training's going to start happening. Here's our expectation for user adoption. Here's the milestones that we expect for speed to value. What a relief if I'm buying a tool that I need to help me do something in 8 months and you're showing me speed to value in 4 to 6 months. Training setup's going to take 30 days. Training starts in month 2, month 3, 4, and 5. We're kind of going through adoption. By month 6, we should be seeing some speed, some value from that. What a load off my mind. How much better do you think I'm going to walk out of that call knowing that I basically made the right choice? Now we have to go and walk the walk, but at least we're giving them some comfortability in the plan that we have. And then I think you have to give them some homework. So those KPIs that we talked about, when are they measured? Over a month, over a quarter, over a year? Like, how are you measuring those to determine success? And then have them give you the numbers on where those KPIs are. So, a lot of times for me, it could be just training SDRs. It could be training AEs. It could be working with frontline managers. It could be doing fractional and reshaping a whole sales process. That's what people bring me in for. My KPIs are going to change sometimes, but when I start working with them, I want to know, okay, what is KPI 1? What is KPI 2? What is KPI 3? And they have to furnish those to me. I like to see dashboard screenshots. More importantly, do you want to measure these monthly or quarterly? Don't typically look at annually because it's very long. Typically it is monthly because we work 3 to 6 month contracts. So, in 3 months, we want to start seeing them successful. We don't measure quarter over quarter. We want to measure incremental growth monthly. So give them that homework. Get me what those current KPIs are over the certain time period that we're going to measure, list of users that need to be set up, and then any integration requirements. Give me your API keys for this. Give me your tech specs for that, whatever it might be. Give them some homework. Give them something to do before that next call. And then the last part, set those next steps. So, Billy, any chance you would have a problem getting to me that information in the next 3 days? No worries. In the meantime, I'll work on this, and this, and we'll meet at this date and time. Does that sound fair? Now that, bam, fam, book a meeting following a meeting. The sales cycle doesn't necessarily stop once the sale is made. You should still be following some of the same principles. And so make sure that there's those clear next steps. Set that time frame in which you should go get what I need. I'll go work on this in the background. We'll come together. So we've had a productive little bit of time in between that, and we can start going. Because the other thing you all got to remember, they're paying for it now. So they got to move. And it always baffles me when someone makes a purchase for something and it's like, oh man, they drawed out the sales process so long. But like we were just talking about other things today, once somebody is a customer, it's weird when they just seem to take a lack of engagement, even though they're constantly paying their bills. And it's like, wow, I figured you'd move faster now that you're actually paying for it. But it seems like maybe that's just who you are in terms of speed. But it's, they're paying for it now. So time is of the essence and it's time to move. So that's your doctor's orders. That's how I feel about deal handoff and what I've seen work really well and what I try to advise in terms of what should be on this handoff template that we're using. What are some of the things I should be asking them to do? What are some of the things I should be doing that call? And then what should we be doing at the end of the call? And what's the next step?
And that's a lot of detail. And I'm sure if you DM Chet on LinkedIn, he'll send you that document at no charge.
Maybe.
I think there's 2 points to it. And I think you did a really good job of summarizing the way to address them. I think it's important for any seller or any customer success manager to remember that the minute that contract gets signed, that pit in the buyer's stomach gets a little bit bigger because you're done with the shopping and now you got to build.
The moment it's signed or the moment you enter banking details and the money's wired?
The moment it's signed, you start thinking about that implementation. But, I think about buyers a lot. And like one thing to remember, they could have bought your platform before. They could have bought it multiple times before. But you are physically in whatever room your feet are in. And what I mean by that is like, you might have successfully implemented this software before at another company, but now you're at a new one and the circumstances and the stakes change completely. And it's important that we as sellers and customer success managers and anybody on the provider side recognize that. I think as a customer, somebody said this I think it was at the Sales Enablement Summit. The sales team is a free sample into the way the rest of the organization is going to work. And that stuck to me when you were talking about, the customer's why and that rundown. Priorities change, especially if you're in the kind of sales cycle that's much longer and you touch a lot bigger part of the enterprise. What was top of mind 8 months ago at the start of the evaluation may not be the same as what it is at the end of it.
I've even had that in skill boot camps. We do day one that happened to one of my customers this year. We started talking in March. We signed a contract in May. Our first boot camp kicked off in July. We started working through the material and somebody was like, hey, that was valuable, but I think that was probably something we were dealing with 6 months ago, not so much anymore on one of the days. And I was like, that would make sense because in March we were talking about this.
And that's why I think that simple refresher is so valuable because it's like, shoot, when was that a priority? Oh, right. A year ago when we started talking to y'all.
Yeah.
That's huge. It's great stuff, man.
Thanks, man. That's all we have for today's episode. If you're interested in engaging with us in the podcast further, you can check out all the links to our LinkedIn profile in the episode description, as well as don't forget to check out past episodes and subscribe to the weekly newsletter. can also go directly to the Sales Doctor website, www.thesalesdocrx.com. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts and enjoyed the show, please leave a 5-star review. And if you don't enjoy the show, give us a 1-star review or any other rating that you feel is relevant. We welcome all the feedback. We actually noticed that somebody actually took us up on that offer and gave us a 1-star review. So
we'll try to do better next time.
There you go. Yeah. Well, manage to the 80%, right? If you're listening on Spotify, you can also give a 5-star rating, but even better, click the follow button so that new episodes will show up in your Spotify feed as they're published. Again, big shout out to this sponsor of this week's episode, Kixie. That's our partner in the power dialer space. You know, I use Kixie personally as I'm doing some outreach for 2024, and it's great not having to listen to dial tones. It's great having local presence. It's great being able to do voicemail drop, even leverage SMS communication when I'm targeting people that I've already established communication with, all in one space. So really encourage you to click the link in the description below. They're offering everybody on us a 10-day free trial with hours of call credits included. So we want you to get a try at the software. Check it out. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear your thoughts. That's all. And we look forward to seeing you here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific for another installment of the Sales RX podcast. Stay prescriptive.